The preliminary report on the Hong Kong 747 crash has sent shockwaves through the aviation community, not only because of the tragedy itself, but because the details emerging from the investigation challenge long-held confidence in one of the most iconic aircraft ever built. The Boeing 747, often called the Queen of the Skies, has historically maintained a strong safety record, but this incident in Hong Kong has forced investigators, pilots, engineers, and regulatory authorities to reevaluate assumptions that were once considered unshakable. As the evidence unfolds, the story of this crash has become far more complex, layered, and unsettling than anyone initially imagined. When the aircraft began its final approach toward Hong Kong, everything appeared routine at first glance. Weather conditions, while not perfect, were well within the aircraft's operating limits. Winds were moderate, cloud cover was manageable, and visibility was acceptable for the approach pattern the pilots were executing. The crew consisted of highly experienced professionals, each trained extensively in handling complex landings in Asia's challenging coastal environments. Nothing in the hours before the accident hinted at the disaster that would unfold within minutes. Yet, as investigators scrutinized the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recordings, subtle irregularities began to emerge. There were minor discrepancies in autopilot behavior, slight fluctuations in control surface response, and brief but noticeable disagreements between selected and actual aircraft performance. While these anomalies did not immediately raise red flags, they became significant when viewed through the lens of the catastrophic failure that followed. Investigators now believe that these early signs, although small, were the first indicators of a deeper, more dangerous problem brewing beneath the surface. According to the report, as the aircraft descended from cruising altitude and began configuring for landing, the first officer made a routine comment regarding a slight lag in roll control. Pilots often discuss such small behaviors, especially in older aircraft, but the captain responded with a brief acknowledgement rather than concern. The cockpit voice recorder captured the calm professionalism one would expect from a veteran crew. Yet behind the composed voices, the aircraft's internal systems were beginning to drift toward instability. In the minutes that followed, the 747's flight management system issued 2 advisory alerts related to pitch trim authority. These alerts are rare but not unheard of, and crews are trained to dismiss them if they appear momentarily and correct themselves. The captain noted the alert and continued the approach. The aircraft still responded to inputs, and thrust remained stable. But the data now confirms that the flight was already on a path toward an unrecoverable state. The preliminary report emphasizes a grim pattern. Everything seemed manageable until the final 2 minutes before impact. This aligns with the investigators' belief that a cascading systems malfunction began quietly, then rapidly accelerated during the landing phase. What makes the situation especially alarming is the exact nature of the warnings recorded seconds later. Multiple alarms activated nearly simultaneously, overwhelming the cockpit with audio and visual signals. These were not generic alerts. They were specific, high-priority warnings related to control integrity, flight surface deflection, and unusual aircraft attitude. Everything changed when the aircraft suddenly pitched unexpectedly, then rolled to the left at a steeper than normal angle. The pilots immediately took manual control, disconnecting the autopilot and autothrottle systems. Their voices became sharper, reflecting the urgency of the moment. Emergency checklists were referenced, corrective inputs were made, and the engines were commanded to increase thrust to stabilize the descent. But despite the precise actions taken by the crew, the aircraft did not respond in the way a 747 should under normal circumstances. The investigators highlighted one of the most disturbing findings in the preliminary report: the mismatch between pilot input and aircraft response. The flight data recorder showed significant differences between what the pilots commanded through the control column and what the aircraft's control surfaces actually executed. This mismatch means that the aircraft may have been experiencing a critical malfunction, possibly in its hydraulic systems, control linkages, or computer components governing stability. In a modern jet, especially one as robustly engineered as a Boeing 747, such a mismatch is extraordinarily rare. These systems are heavily redundant, with multiple backups and safeguards designed to prevent exactly this kind of scenario. For such a failure to occur suggests either a catastrophic mechanical breakdown or a deeper, possibly systemic design vulnerability that has gone undetected for years. One of the most chilling revelations comes from the final 30 seconds of flight. As the aircraft descended through the last few hundred feet, the crew fought aggressively to regain control. The voice recorder captured their rapid communication. The first officer calling out airspeed, altitude, and bank angle deviations. The captain commanding thrust adjustments and control corrections, and both pilots working intensely to level the aircraft. Despite their efforts, the plane's left wing dropped further, indicating a loss of aerodynamic lift on that side. The aircraft sank faster than expected, triggering additional stall warnings and terrain proximity alerts. Eyewitnesses on the ground reported seeing the 747 wobble, then veer sharply before impact. Some described hearing the engines roaring at high thrust, suggesting the pilots were attempting a go-around or at least trying to arrest their descent. But the aircraft's attitude was too unstable and the margin for recovery had disappeared. The nose pitched downward in the final seconds, confirming that control was almost entirely lost. The report also raises questions about maintenance history. Investigators discovered notes from previous flights where minor issues were logged in the same systems that failed on the day of the crash. These issues were assessed and cleared according to established procedures, but the pattern of recurring maintenance entries has forced analysts to explore whether the aircraft had been signaling deeper issues for much longer than anyone realized. Another element that has stunned the aviation world is the possibility that environmental factors played a role in accelerating the system failure. Hong Kong's geographical location, surrounded by water, mountains, and rapidly shifting wind patterns, often challenges pilots, but nothing in the weather reports suggested conditions severe enough to cause such a dramatic loss of control. Still, investigators are examining whether microbursts, wind shear pockets, or atmospheric anomalies may have combined with the aircraft's mechanical issues to create a perfect storm. As additional details emerged, technical experts began focusing on the flight control module responsible for mediating between pilot inputs and hydraulic actuation. Preliminary analysis shows that the module may have malfunctioned during the final approach, causing delayed or inaccurate control surface movements. If confirmed, this would represent a serious design or manufacturing flaw, one that could have implications for other aircraft of similar age and configuration. The airline involved has cooperated fully with investigators, releasing statements expressing deep sorrow for the lives lost and committing to full transparency as the inquiry continues. Internally, they have grounded similar aircraft for comprehensive inspections. Their engineers are working closely with the investigative board to identify any previously unnoticed wear patterns, stress fractures, or system anomalies that could shed light on the cause. Among aviation experts, one debate has already begun. Should older aircraft like this 747 undergo more rigorous inspection protocols as they age? While the airframe remained structurally sound for decades, the systems inside it, computers, wiring, hydraulics, actuators age differently. Some specialists argue that modern aircraft systems require more frequent overhauls than previously mandated. Others believe that this crash was an extraordinary anomaly rather than evidence of a broader safety issue. But the preliminary report offers a sobering conclusion. The hidden truth behind the Hong Kong crash is that the aircraft entered a state that pilots are neither trained for nor expected to handle, a situation where the aircraft ignores control commands. Training simulators simply do not replicate total control system failure because the probability of such a failure is believed to be near zero. This incident forces aviation regulators worldwide to reconsider that assumption. The report stops short of stating a final cause, but it strongly indicates that the root of the crash lies in a rare and catastrophic malfunction within the aircraft's control systems, possibly compounded by aging components and previously unnoticed maintenance patterns. The final report may take months or even years to complete, but the implications are already being discussed at the highest levels of aviation safety oversight. In the aftermath, the families of the victims demand answers, and the aviation community demands accountability. As more information surfaces, the narrative becomes clearer. The Hong Kong 747 crash was not the result of pilot error or routine turbulence. It was the outcome of a hidden, escalating failure that left the crew powerless. The preliminary report has opened the door to a deeper truth, one that challenges confidence in long-standing safety assumptions and forces a re-examination of how aircraft systems are monitored, maintained, and designed. While the investigation continues, one thing is undeniable: the tragic loss of this aircraft has become a pivotal moment in aviation history. It has exposed vulnerabilities, raised critical questions, and shed light on hidden risks that will shape future safety protocols worldwide. The world now watches closely as investigators search for the final answers behind the Hong Kong 747 crash and the shocking flaws revealed in its preliminary report.